What's up guys, iRpie here, and I've been playing a lot more BAPBAP, and one of the most common questions I seem to be seeing people ask is what items you go on each character. Now, I've been going through and playing a whole bunch of different characters. I've also been trying to keep in mind what people are talking about, as well as the people I kill, what items are they taking, and what items are efficient, all that kind of stuff, alright? So what I've generated is a item guide. Now this is gonna have an image form, so if you want to save it and keep it around, the link should be down below, somewhere in the description down there. And when you're down there, you might as well hit that subscribe button as well if you are new here. We are gonna be going through each of these items, each of the characters, and there are gonna be 3 categories of items that we are gonna be sorting them all into. First is core items. Core items are essentially items that I would always take on the character. It is by far the best items on that character, and some characters might even need these just to function. Next is nice tier, which is where a lot of the items are going to be sitting. Basically, once you have all your core items at a decent level, I would probably pick up some nice items to round it out. If you find a nice item that's like 1 or 2 tiers above what you have in your core, I might replace it, depending on, what the thing is. And then, of course, the last is the don't tier, which is, don't take it. Just don't. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Alright, so with that said, let's get on with it. The first character is gonna be Kitsu. Alright, so Kitsu is a ranged sniper character, and there's roughly 2-ish playstyles. The most important one, the strongest one that she has is gonna be the really strong auto attack base build, where you just get poked down before you even get close to her, and by the time you get close to her, you're pretty much dead. So, for that, you will always need your sword and your boots. That's like non-negotiable. Because Kitsu only has 1 jump, you really need to be able to get away from mostly assassins. The big tanks are not really that big of a deal, because most of them only have 1 big engage, and you can always dodge that using your 1 invulnerability frame with your space skill. So you don't really have to worry too much about tanks. What you do need the mobility for is to avoid assassins. So what the boots does is, number 1, it gives you a little bit of HP. Number 2 is that once you do your dash away, you can just book it, alright? Because a lot of the assassins have like 2+ mobility skills, you want to be making as much distance between you and them as possible, so that you don't get, Froggy jumps on you, you use your space skill to avoid it, and then they tongue you, for example. So you want to be able to avoid that long range tongue as best as possible, and mobility helps so much with that. It also helps a lot with kiting, so before they even get into range to do their jump or their tongue or skinny invisibility, like, move range, basically you want as much speed as possible so that you can be backing up while firing at your target. Kitsu also scales really well with attack damage. Not only her auto attacks, but her skills as well. You'll often find that a gold sword Kitsu will literally auto attack a Froggy, and the Froggy loses like 50% plus of their HP, which is just absolutely insane. It's nasty. It is so good in duels. So there we go. Those are the core items. I would always grab these whenever I can. Now the nice to haves are attack speed, crit, heart to a little bit of a lesser degree, and cooldown. Now if you grab cooldown along with these 2, you're going to be a little bit more of a caster build. So if you have like a purple or a gold cooldown banana, then you should be firing your skills as often as possible. Use that Q to space, use that ultimate to try to get an engage on people, because most of the time Kitsu doesn't really have a problem when people engage her, but she has a problem chasing people. So your ultimate will help a lot with that, and having it on lower cooldown means that you can keep trying. Just try to land a snipe, land a Q on top of them, and they should just lose like 90% of their HP, and they can't even reach you, which is absolutely disgusting. But more often than not, you'll probably be grabbing either a sash or a crit glasses, which will make your autos hit even harder. And as soon as you land 1 or 2, they are done. Like a Froggy getting hit by like 2 arrows will lose 80% of his HP, and there's no way he can engage anymore. Now the heart is just a last kind of choice there. It's not the greatest choice, but, out of these 3 defensive items, like, I would always take the heart, simply because the heart gives you a very good survivability, anti-burst and all that kind of stuff. Maybe helps you live long enough to use the second dash, to get out of there if needed. So I genuinely really do like heart on most characters. I don't think there's any point where I wouldn't put heart on a character, at the very least in a nice spot. Now, the don'ts are the Thorn and the Lifesteal. Now, you might be wondering, like, considering how much damage you do, why don't you grab Lifesteal? Well, the problem is, if you start losing health, it's already kind of too late. As a Kitsu, you don't want people to be able to get up to you. You don't want them to damage you. You want to damage them to the point where they don't want to come close to you. And if they get to the point where they can actually damage you, lifesteal is not gonna save you. Like, it's just not. You would rather want a heart in that situation so that you don't get bursted as quickly, and maybe you can get 1 or 2 more shots in to possibly kill them, but lifesteal is not it. Moving on to the next character, we have Anna. So Anna is a bit of a weird one, and I might even put sword not as important there. The most important item by far on Anna is actually gonna be the cooldown, which is strange to say. I think she's the only person where cooldown matters this much, and that's because, unlike Kitsu, Anna is number one, first and foremost, an assassin, and secondly, her mobility doesn't base around, like, just moving around. Her dash is on, like, a 3-second cooldown with Gold Watch, which is insane. You just dash all over the place, you'll be able to catch up to every single person, you'll be able to run away from every single person. No one in the entire game should be able to catch you there. So, having a really high cooldown is really important for that, and on top of that, Anna's auto attack is kind of weird to use. I don't know, might be just me, but to me, I think that Anna's auto attacks are a bit harder to use, compared to, like, most of the other characters, and so, I wouldn't use the attack speed as much. I would mostly rely on the Q as well as the ultimate in order to do a massive amount of burst, and then finally use my auto attacks to finish them up. And that's why I would say attack damage is the most important part, because it boosts the damage from your Q and boosts the damage from your auto attacks, and it boosts your damage from your ultimate, which are like the ultimate and the Q are the majority thing that will keep people scared. You mostly use your auto attack against tanks, and honestly at that point, like, you don't really need much else. You can just constantly stay away from tanks. They're never gonna catch up to you. You don't have to worry. Now, in terms of nice to haves, I think the shoes are still nice to have. Like, yes, you have all this mobility from your cooldown, but having boots on top of that means that you are like no one should be able to catch you. You are literally the Roadrunner, and the Coyote is every single player in the entire game. So with boots, with cooldown, no one should be able to catch you, and you can just pick every single fight you want. So you can just slowly poke them down, make sure they can't heal by dashing up to them and dodging all their abilities, but just constantly attacking them so that they can't heal, which is the most annoying mosquito playstyle out there, but it works. And let's see, lifesteal is really, really good, because what you mostly do is you want to wait until the enemy has burned their stuns, and then you use your ultimate. And by then you might have taken a little bit of damage, but your lifesteal should keep you healthy during your ultimate, because it does so much massive damage. And if you hit like 2 or 3 people, you'll be healing a lot. So lifesteal is very, very good on Anna there. Health for pretty much the same reason. If you can't get bursted during your ultimate, you will just outdamage every single person. And lastly, crit is, I would probably put crit over attack speed, simply because Anna's attack animations are kind of longer, so I think attack speed isn't actually that useful, and the crit just makes it so that your damage will be a tiny bit higher. And I would say out of these 3, I would probably pick one of the survivability items, because Anna already does a massive amount of damage just from the Q and just from the ultimate, but crit is probably my go-to if you want to go for a little bit more attack damage base, like, an auto attack base playstyle. And of course, thorns, just don't take thorns. Like, never take thorns when heart is on the table, essentially. And yeah, like, thorns is mostly used in the early game, and that's it. Like, it's there as a placeholder until you get something better, because the thorn damage is not that high right now, and the defensive capability of the thorn armor is it's not as good. It's just not as good. Alright, but that's pretty much it. There is not really much different Anna playstyles. I think the ultimate, the skill base and dashing base Anna is probably a much better playstyle than the range Anna, especially since recently they nerfed the range of her Q and her auto attacks. So yeah, just go with the high dash, high mobility assassin Anna. It just works better. Alright, moving on. Next we have Chuck. So Chuck is an interesting one. He is probably more of a tank than Sashimi, and the reason for that is because of his ultimate. His ultimate makes it so that he attacks very, very quickly, and if you have health plus lifesteal, it makes it so that it'll be so hard to burst down a Chuck during his ultimate. You still have plenty of CC in terms of your jump, in terms of your punch. And one thing to keep in mind, by the way, in case you didn't know this mechanic, when Chuck ultimates, it also resets the cooldown on his Q and his jump, which means you actually have 4 stun in your kit if you play it properly. So that's why, cooldown is nice, but it's not as necessary. And yeah, I would say for Chuck, just grab these 2 items, and then maybe attack speed, or a tank item, or a movement speed so you can catch up to people so you can punch them more. You just constantly want to be punching. He's more of a berserker than anything else, and that's why lifesteal is so important on Chuck there. So yeah, grab any of these other items, either survivability. If you really want to provide a little bit more stunning, a little bit more catching, a little bit more mobility, then cooldown is okay. It's fine. But I would say grabbing these 2 plus one of these 3 is probably my most ideal Chuck builds. And then finally we have the just don't your Chuck doesn't scale nearly as well with attack damage because he's a tank, and the crit is just not as good on him because he goes for very quick same attacks, not going for big burst swings. Compared to Sashimi, which we'll talk about in a second, where crit is actually better on him. I would say that yeah, just you don't need this damage. Chuck already does plenty of damage, and during the stun, you will essentially lock them down and you just murder them, and you'll never die because of these other items. So this is the most ideal Chuck build, in my opinion. Next, we have Sashimi. So Sashimi is actually the better tank. I would say out of Chuck and Sashimi, if I want a tank on my team, I would probably pick Sashimi. But it's not because he's better at tanking. He's better at CCing. His CC is nasty. His ultimate has such a big range, and it's so quick, and it's really hard to predict because he jumps in the air. There's nothing on the ground to tell you where to dodge. So you just kind of have to pray that he doesn't hit you, or you have to burn your mobility skill. On top of that, he has his dash, which is also a knockup. He has his Q, which is also a stun. So he can lock you down for a very, very long time. And as an assassin, I fear Sashimi's so much. I have to play perfectly around Sashimi or I'll just die. So I would definitely go health. Health is just really, really good. The best defensive item out there. Now, I would actually put crit on Sashimi as a core item. Sashimi has really high base damage. His swings are slower than Chuck by a little bit, but it hurts so much. And if you actually manage to land a 3-hit combo, all 3 critting, you will one-shot a Froggy. Just straight up with 3 hits, which is just absolutely nutty. Just health by itself is already enough to make you an okay tank. If you really want to go full tank, you can go Thorns, you can go Lifesteal. You'll be okay. You'll last in a fight, and you might be able to stun 2 or 3 times. I would say if you want to go a little bit more offensive, going health, going crit, going attack speed will just absolutely obliterate any assassins, obliterate anyone that gets up to you. And if you find yourself having a hard time catching up to one of these range characters, then I would say going for boots will be okay as well. Now, you wouldn't want to go sword, same reason as Chuck. You just don't scale well. You already have very high base damage. Chuck has very high base damage. You don't need the sword, and the sword doesn't scale as well on you compared to other characters. You don't have such easy access to enemies compared to assassins, compared to range characters, so sword is just not that good. And cooldown, I actually find Sashimi's cooldown to be perfectly okay, even without the cooldown, which is strange. For a character that has 3 stuns, you would think that cooldown would be really good, but all my experiences, I would rather have more damage so that my first round of stuns will kill someone, or I would rather have defensive stats so that I can survive long enough, because if you grab cooldown, you are sacrificing one of these other stats, and I honestly think that all of these other stats are better for Sashimi compared to cooldown. I don't know. This may be a little bit more of an opinion thing, and I gotta say, all of this is purely opinion. I'm sure some of these, other mains might have a disagreement on what to grab, but this is just from my experience of playing these characters. I think that cooldown isn't as important on Sashimi. Anyways, moving on. Next, we have Kiddo. So Kiddo is it's a strange one. Now, I've kind of grown a little bit more attached to Kiddo now, a tiny bit more, but I still don't like the fact that he has no CC and he has no mobility. And for that, I think that the boots is so important. for Kiddo because you need to be able to move quickly. You need to be able to constantly dodge people. And when you have a very strong boot plus your space, you can just zoom around the map. It's nutty. So, like, shoes is pretty much non-negotiable. And strangely enough, you want attack speed. You might think that Kiddo is a caster, but his abilities already do very good base damage. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the burn damage might not scale with attack damage. This is something I need to test. But overall, I think Kiddo does enough damage, and his biggest asset and the easiest thing for him to land is actually his auto attacks, which is why attack speed plus shoes Kiddo is just so absolutely nutty strong. You just can't catch him. Whenever you try to catch up to him, he just space and he will just move out of the way. And when you try to move away from him, like you're like, okay, maybe I'll just reset and wait until next time. Well, he's just gonna zoom right up to you and just constantly auto attack you, and you just can't do anything. With a gold sash, with the gold shoes, Kiddo is one of the strongest characters, but obviously getting up there is pretty difficult. Now, outside of that, I would say all of these items are plenty usable. Sword, as I mentioned, his skills don't scale nearly as well, which is why I think attack speed is better on Kiddo, because it's just easier to land. But sword in general will boost his spell damage. It will boost his auto attack damage. It's just an okay thing. If I were to pick, I would say out of these four, I would either take cooldown. Actually, I would say I would probably pick the other three over the sword, simply because Kiddo damage is already pretty decent, and his survivability is the most important part. So grabbing health will give you some health regen. Oh, by the way, I guess I haven't talked about this, but if you guys don't know, items have a secondary stat. Every single item, well, most items have a secondary stat to it. You have to hover over the item and hold space, and it'll tell you what the other thing is. So, for example, shoes give HP, attack speed gives movement speed, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on that one. Crit, which gives crit damage as well. Health pack gives you HP regen. Cooldown gives you move speed. Thorns give you HP. Lifesteal also gives you HP. So, like, all of these things have a secondary effect, and with the heart, it gives you HP regeneration, which is going to be helpful during the downtimes when you are just poking them, and say they have thorns or something like that, then it'll keep you a little bit healthier in general. Same with lifesteal. Lifesteal will keep you healthy as you auto-attack people, and most of the time you'll just stay away from them. You might get hit a couple times, and then you use your space, you get out of there, and then while you auto-attack them, the lifesteal will just suck it all back up. And lastly, the cooldown will just make it so that I've actually had the displeasure of playing against a gold shoe, a gold cooldown, and a gold attack speed Kiddo, and it was just impossible. Like, I could not run away from that Kiddo as a Froggy. That's how insane it is. He chased me across the map, and he was constantly auto-attacking me, and there's nothing I can do about it, because he just constantly presses space, and he's just zooming around the map. So, yeah, I would say, like, I would grab one of these three, things as the third item for survivability. The sword is just still a very good item. I won't grab thorns, same reason as all these other ones. Like, thorns is just not good. And crit is actually not great on Kiddo, surprisingly. Like, I don't know. I feel like I would always just grab sword, because sword at the very least boosts some of the damage, some of the skill damage, while the crit only hits on the auto attack. If you guys don't know, skills don't crit. So I literally went through and did some testing with Swain there, and we tested all the abilities. They do not crit. So yeah, Kiddo just has more benefits from the auto attacks from the sword. So that's pretty much it. Okay, moving on. Next we have, alright, so Zook is one of the strongest characters in the game right now, I think, and mostly because of the fact that compared to Kitsu, he doesn't need the mobility. He doesn't need the shoe, which makes him incredibly tanky, because a secondary item I usually always grab on Zook is just life. And he becomes this absolute tank that just sits there, and you can't burst him down, and he will poke you down, and if you dash up to him, he will throw his ultimate on top of himself, and you'll take massive, massive bursts. His damage is skyrocket right now, and it's just not fair. So, as soon as you grab a very strong sword on Zook, you will just burst every single person down. You have more than enough damage. Your Q will just nuke people. And your auto attacks will nuke people. If you guys don't know, one thing about Zook is that Zook auto attacks and Q does more damage on direct hit compared to explosion. So I believe base line, you do 200 damage on auto attack. 80 of it is on the direct hit of the rocket, and 120 is on the splash damage. So if you hit directly, you do 200 damage. If you only hit them with the splash, it only does 120. So keep that in mind. If you manage to get a purple or gold sword, a direct hit with a rocket will just chunk people. It will chunk people. It's not okay. And your ultimate will also do plenty of damage as well. So yeah, sword and HP will just keep a Zook incredibly healthy, incredibly happy. Now, other than that, like everything else is just for flavor. Do you want your rockets? Do you want to attack more with your rockets? Grab the attack speed. Do you want to fire more Qs? Grab the cooldown. And your cooldown also makes you a little bit safer because your jump will constantly be up there. And if you want to be, a little bit safer in the same way, you can grab shoes, which will give you mobility and give you a little bit more health. And the lifesteal is the worst choice for me out of these items. The lifesteal is good because if they jump onto you and you just toss your ultimate on top of them, you just suck up so much immediate HP because of the massive damage it does. The lifesteal is going to be useful for doing any long range poking against other Zooks, against Kitsus. You'll be able to like a lot of times when a Zook fights a Kitsu, it's an aim battle, and you guys are both at maximum range, and every once in a while you'll hit one, every once in a while they'll hit one, and the lifesteal will keep you safe during those situations where they hit one and then you hit one and you'll heal up, and yeah. And Thorn, same reason, just not too useful there. Like, you would never take a Thorn over an HP at any point. And crit is, like, it's just okay. I genuinely like the attack speed because it forces people more. Attack speed just makes it so that people panic, right? Like, people a lot of times will get a timing of your auto attacks and try to go in between, right? But having a higher attack speed means that they have less time to try to like move closer. Think about it from like a fighting game standpoint. If someone's like spamming Hadouken, there is a set rhythm, and you'll be like, okay, I know when the rhythm is, and I can approach that way. But getting attack speed kind of throws off that rhythm and makes it much harder for them to approach. Compared to crit will make it so that it does more damage, but your Q will not get a bonus in damage. Your ultimate will not get a bonus in damage. So for me, grabbing attack speed so that I can keep people further away while my Q and my ultimate does the rest of the damage in zoning is better than grabbing a crit. I would rather grab one of the HP survival items or one of the mobility survival items over the crit at any point, because you don't want to get bursted. Like, there will always be times where a Froggy or a Skinny manages to sneak up by you or jump you from a bush or something like that, and during those times I would definitely want a survival item over it. And plus, these things give you movement speed, which allows you to catch up as well. So next we have Skinny. Okay, so Skinny, I've been playing a lot with Skinny and with other Skinnies, as well as playing Skinny himself. And Skinny is actually really interesting because almost every item works on him. And even to an extent, like, even though I put Thorn down here, Thorn is still good on Skinny. So I don't know. So I would say the core items is sword and attack speed. His attack speed is actually really, really slow to begin with, and once you grab a little bit of attack speed, the world's your oyster, right? You just go in and your swings will just be rapid fire, and once you have the attack speed, you can pretty much grab everything else. The sword is also really, really good, and that is more for fighting things like tanks or people who are really, really squishy, because the sword will allow you to just like stealth in, Q, E, and it will melt all the squishies. And it will also allow you to poke out the tanks very, very slowly, because a lot of these tanks have like a lot of life and some life steal and health regeneration and all that. You want very, very high attack so that you can just kind of slowly burst them down, because you don't want to be fighting a tank head on. Never do you want to fight a tank head on. You want to be going for a little bit of hit and run tactics where you go in, you Q, you E, and then you run out, essentially. Sword plus attack speed will just make your Skinny incredibly strong. And then outside of that, like, if you want a little bit more duking power, and this is against, like, say you get a tank down to like 40% HP, you want to fight them, then you probably want the lifesteal so that you can essentially fight against their lifesteal. The shoes, pretty much self-explanatory. It's going to be very helpful for catching up to one of these range characters who play at, like, Zook or Kitsu, who plays a maximum range. You want that movement speed so that you can go invisible and actually catch up to them while they're backing away. Cause, you know, like, even though you get that speed boost, sometimes because they know where you are, they will just constantly be backing away, and it's just almost impossible to catch up to them. So the boots help a lot in that respect of getting up to them. Health is, you know, once again, self-explanatory. You don't want to get bursted. Pretty much the same deal as the lifesteal there. You have the crit. Now, crit is if you want to go for a purely assassin build. It's good. If you fight a lot of people who are playing, like, you know, squishier characters, you can just walk in, Q, auto attack, E, and they're dead. There's nothing they can do about it. And yeah, if you manage to get gold of all three, like, you will just melt every single person, even tanks. Like, there's nothing they can do about it. So that's why I would still put it in nice, but overall, like, realistically, you probably want a survival item instead. And lastly, cooldown is a very interesting item on Skinny. And it's one of those things that doesn't actually work on Froggy, but it works so well on Skinny, simply because you can just go for a very, very annoying strategy of you stealth in, Q, and you walk away. Like, you just walk away. Like, there's nothing the other person can do about it. Because there's no way they can predict where you're coming from, because you're stealth at the time. You Q them, which will do damage, and interrupt any healing they're doing, and then you just back away, and you're with a high enough cooldown, your stealth would be fast enough that you essentially prevent them from ever healing. Like, you just constantly go in, hit them. They try to heal, you stealth, walk up, hit them. And then their HP just slowly goes down, and there's nothing they can do about it. So it's amazing. It's especially amazing against, like, the tanks. And yeah, like, Thorn is just, like, grab Thorn if you really need it, and if you want to go full tank, you actually can. You can go, I believe it's, lifesteal, health, and thorns. You can just purely stack up tank, Skinny, and it's okay. You are just there as, like, kind of a stun bot. You go in, and your ultimate does a very solid amount of base damage, so you can use that to finish, people off. But overall, I would say the best Skinnies are gonna be the one that goes a little bit more offensive, because you want to be able to burst people down. Alright, lastly, my main man, Froggy. Now, Froggy is also interesting. Froggy is definitely one of the strongest characters in the game right now. And, like, you know, in part is because of his, like, incredible amount of mobility. He is incredibly squishy, and compared to Skinny, he does not have a stealth to get him out of, like, it's not a get out free card, comparatively. And Froggy will have to keep in mind where he fights, but because he has 3 iframes, a highly skilled player can actually dodge all the abilities and go full damage and still be okay. And for me, I like playing my Froggy with attack speed, with crit, with attack damage. Maybe replace the crit with one of these, like one of the survival items. But, you know, it's all kind of down to preference, and I would say all of these items are actually amazing. The only item that is, like, super core to, like, all the builds is attack speed. Froggy doesn't benefit as much from attack damage because Froggy lacks a 3rd damage skill. Q does not do any damage compared to every other character whose Q, space, and like, except Anna, I guess. Anna's the only character where the space doesn't do damage, but it doesn't matter because all cooldowns are pretty low. So Froggy's Q doesn't do any damage. Every other character has a Q that does damage. So Froggy is more of an auto attack based character, and that's why attack speed is so good on him. And on top of that, Froggy has a 3-hit bonus. Now, there's only 2 characters in the game that has it, if I'm correct. Yeah. So I believe, yeah, Froggy and Sashimi are the 2 characters that benefit from attack speed the most because they have the 3-hit combo. And basically, they go in, they want to make sure they hit 3 times. And the best way to ensure that 3rd hit is through attack speed. So yeah, attack speed, core on Froggy, but everything else is good. You can run attack speed, crit, sword. Perfectly fine. You just be a more mobile assassin. You have to play a little bit harder. You can grab attack speed, life, and shoes, and that's perfectly fine. You will be playing a little bit of a tankier playstyle, and you'll be a little bit mobile. You can grab, like, you know, attack speed, attack damage, and movement speed, and you'll be a little bit more mobile, a little bit less bursty, but it's still good. You can grab attack speed, lifesteal, and HP and be an unkillable tank. Because you just lifesteal through your incredibly fast auto attacks, and you have your health regen and max health to keep you safe. So there's a lot of different ways to play Froggy, and they're all very viable. The only thing is, I would not, Thorn, same thing. Like, Thorn is just the worst item in the game right now. Like, you can see, just purely from this list, like, Thorn is always in the don't, or the, maybe nice to have. It's never a core item. Because there's just better core stats. Cooldown is surprisingly bad for Froggy. You might be thinking, hey, Froggy has such, so much mobility, so much iframes. You might think that cooldown is actually really good on Froggy, because, he can do it more. But Froggy doesn't need it. Like, Froggy's cooldowns is, just good enough. His, jump and his E will have plenty of CC there to give you some cooldown back. And then, as you chase and auto attack, them, you have your Q to keep up with them. And the cooldowns really is not necessary. You want to be able to burst them down within the first rotation, or, you do enough damage to them during your first rotation so that you never have to cast a second, rotation. So, cooldown is just, You can't really play the skinny playstyle of going in, doing some damage, and then backing out, simply because it's much easier to see when a Froggy is coming, and it's much easier to dodge. A lot of these other characters have iframes. Skinny, essentially, he can go invisible, and you don't know when he's gonna be coming in for an attack. He could be using his E to dash in for an attack, so you don't even have range, to hit him there. He could use his Q, he could come in from any angle to attack you. There's not really much you can do about it. Froggy, on the other hand, you will be able to see him, and, you can't really do the hit and run playstyle nearly as well. But I would probably go through a more of a playstyle, guide for each of these characters, sometime, in the future. This is just meant to be more of an items guide. So, yeah. I would say, you can kind of already tell from the way this, whole thing goes. You have your core items. I think sword is a very good item. I think that attack speed is a very good item. I think health is a very good item. Movement speed is okay. You guys can pretty much see what items to grab at any point on any character. There are some items that are just universally good. Health is universally good. Sword is almost universally good. Just don't grab it on tanks. Shoes is almost, shoes is universally good. You never not want movement speed. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the item guide. Is there anything else I really want to talk about? I think that's pretty much good. If you guys enjoyed this item guide, I'm gonna be making a lot more BAPBAP content in the upcoming days. I have a couple. I think I have a beginner's guide video coming out sometime later on, and just little something there might be some more codes on there. So if you guys are looking for a code, or if you have friends who are looking for a code to access the game, maybe come back Thursday-ish. Yeah, I might have something for you. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that jazz. And I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.